She was 14, black, and standing alone, yet somehow she was the one being treated like a threat. Marjorie Vaughn, assistant bank manager, saw Amira Langston and saw a problem, not a person. She didn't see the scholarship letter. She didn't see the honor student. She saw skin and made a decision. But when they picked Amira, they didn't know who they were messing with. They didn't know her mother was Naomi Langston, a nationally respected financial CEO, and a woman who built her career by exposing lies and holding the powerful accountable. What came next wasn't just justice. It was exposure. And it would shake the walls of that bank to its core. Before we go any further, comment where in the world you're watching from and make sure to subscribe, because the story you're about to hear isn't just about one girl. It's about all of us. Morning light spilled through the high windows of Jefferson Bank, glinting off polished marble floors. People came and went, their voices low, their footsteps soft. But in the far corner, a child stood still, waiting. Not for service, but for someone to see her worth. It was a crisp autumn morning in Willow Creek, the kind that made the air smell like school books in changing leaves. 14-year-old Amira Langston stood at the foot of Jefferson Bank's wide stone steps, her fingers tightening around a leather folder that held a check for $5,000, 0 cents. She took a deep breath. Inside that folder wasn't just money. It was proof. Proof that all those late nights hunched over textbooks, all those early mornings practicing speeches had finally led to something real, her first academic scholarship. And this morning, she had insisted on making the deposit by herself. Her mother had offered to come twice, but Amira had stood tall and said no. "I need to do this alone, Mama," she'd said over breakfast, her voice steady even as her hands shook, pouring the orange juice. "I want to learn how." Her mother had only nodded, but the way her eyes lingered on Amira's back as she left the house said everything. A mother's pride never spoke too loudly. It didn't have to. Now, standing in her school uniform and worn black loafers, Amira walked through the heavy glass doors of the bank. The air inside was cold and scented faintly of waxed floors and printer ink. She joined the queue, gripping the check like it might fly away if she let go. A few adults around her gave passing glances, but no one smiled. No one asked if she needed help. She told herself it didn't matter. She was here to take a step into the adult world, paperwork, signatures, and all. But wasn't this supposed to feel different? More empowering? Maybe even a little celebratory? Her heart thudded as the line moved forward. She rehearsed her words in her head. "I'd like to deposit this, please." Simple, straightforward. So why did she feel like she didn't quite belong? As she approached the counter and met the indifferent eyes of the teller, a question pressed into her chest like a stone. How many others had stood right here trying to prove they deserved to be taken seriously? She handed over the check, unaware that this simple act would soon unravel into something far greater than she had ever imagined. Amira smiled nervously as she slid the check across the counter. "I'd like to make a deposit," she said softly, just as she'd practiced. The teller, a young man with a name tag that read Zach, glanced at her, then at the check. His brows lifted and his mouth twitched, not into a smile, but something closer to disbelief. He picked up the check like it was something he hadn't expected to see. $5,000, he said, voice just loud enough for people nearby to hear. "This yours?" Amira swallowed hard. "Yes, sir. It's my scholarship. I have the letter and my school ID." She opened her folder, her fingers trembling just a little, and offered the documents. Zach didn't even glance at them. Instead, he held the check up to the light, squinting at it with the intensity of a jeweler examining a diamond. From across the floor, a woman in a fitted navy suit and sharp heels approached. She moved like she owned the air she walked through. Her nameplate read, "Marjorie Vaughn, Assistant Manager." "We've had some fraudulent checks lately," Marjorie muttered, more to the room than to Amira, but loud enough to wound. Her tone wasn't suspicious. It was accusatory, as if the truth had already been decided. Amira's mouth went dry. "But I have all the paperwork. We'll need to verify it." Marjorie cut her off, taking the documents without eye contact. "Please step aside while we look into it." No warmth, no thanks, no welcome. Just doubt, neatly wrapped in bank protocol. Amira stepped back, her cheeks burning. Around her, people stared. Not long, just enough. Long enough to make her feel small. She wasn't crying, but she was shrinking bit by bit. As Fagel, when was the last time someone looked at you and saw only what they expected, not who you truly were? Minutes passed. People came and went. Some laughed, some were greeted by name. But Amira stood off to the side, invisible and yet completely exposed. And somewhere inside, a quiet understanding settled. This wasn't just about a check. It was about who they thought should be holding it. They told her to wait. So Amira waited, first by the velvet rope near the teller windows. Then, after a quiet conversation she wasn't meant to hear, she was moved to a corner near the glass doors. Not a seat, just a space, as if she were in the way. The minutes crawled. She clutched her folder to her chest, its contents now somewhere behind a counter, behind glass, behind eyes that didn't seem to trust her. Around her, the bank buzzed on. A man was offered coffee. An elderly couple was walked to a desk with smiles and light conversation. And Amira? Not a single glance, not a word. Then the assistant manager, Marjorie Vaughn, spoke again, but not to her. "Keep an eye on that one," she told the security guard, not bothering to lower her voice. "Make sure she doesn't try to leave." That one. The words hit like ice water down her spine. Not the young lady. Not even the customer. Just that one. Amira stiffened as the guard stepped closer, his stance wide, arms crossed. She looked down, not in fear, but in disbelief. She hadn't raised her voice. She hadn't done a single thing wrong. What does it do to a child to be treated like a threat before she's even spoken her truth? Still, she stood tall. Her father used to say, "Don't let their fear become your shame." She remembered that now. His voice soft, his hands callous from building homes, not breaking them. So she took a breath, and another. Oh, she felt the stares, even though whispers curled through the air like smoke. Her silence was not weakness, it was armor. And as the minutes stretched into something crueler, deeper than waiting, Amira made a quiet vow. They could doubt her, but she would not doubt herself. The marble beneath Amira's feet had grown colder. She shifted her weight, legs aching, but kept her back straight. Every so often, her eyes flicked toward the front desk, where her documents had vanished, still unprocessed. Then something shifted. Through the glass partition, Marjorie Vaughn walked briskly toward a sharply dressed man who had just entered. He was tall, with silver at his temples, and the quiet confidence of someone used to being obeyed. Amira didn't recognize him at first, but she noticed how Marjorie straightened her blazer, how her tone softened when she greeted him. She wasn't just being polite, she was performing. The man's name floated to Amira's memory like a whisper, Conrad Baines. Her mother had mentioned him once. CEO of Jefferson Bank, one of the fiercest rivals to her firm. Why was he here? Marjorie led him to a quiet corner. She handed him a manila folder, thick and stamped with the word confidential. They spoke in low tones, but their body language said enough. This wasn't routine business. This was a secret being sold. Amira's heart pounded. She instinctively reached for the notebook in her backpack, the one she carried everywhere to jot ideas and questions. Her fingers shook as she wrote what she saw. The time, the names, the folder. This had nothing to do with her check. She wasn't just being delayed. She was being hidden. Out of the way, out of sight. Because Marjorie had something to protect. Or something to hide. If it were 14 years old and uncovered a betrayal this big, what would you do? Would you speak? or stay silent. Amira bit her lip. She could feel something cracking open, like a curtain being pulled back, revealing the machinery behind the stage. And now she wasn't just the girl with the scholarship check. She was a witness. Room open and the glass doors of the bank swung open with a soft chime. An ordinary sound, but to Amira, it landed like thunder. There stood Naomi Langston. Her presence filled the lobby before she said a word. Hair swept back, charcoal blazer sharp as her eyes. She moved with the grace of someone used to boardrooms and battles, and she was already scanning the room before her heels touched the marble floor. Marjorie Vaughn spotted her instantly. "Mrs. Langston," she said with thin politeness, lips stretching into a smile that didn't touch her eyes. "We weren't expecting you today." Naomi didn't return the smile. She walked straight toward her daughter, still standing in the same corner, still watched by security. Her voice, though calm, carried weight. "Amira," she said, "are you all right?" Amira blinked back tears, not of weakness, but of release. "I'm okay," she replied, her voice steady. "But you need to hear what I saw." She pulled her notebook from her backpack and began to read, not just about the humiliation or the waiting or the subtle cruelty, but about the meeting between Marjorie and Conrad Baines, the confidential folder, the whispers. Every detail, every timestamp was there. The lobby fell still. Naomi listened, her jaw tightening with each word. When Amira finished, Naomi turned to Marjorie. "I believe you owe my daughter an apology," she said, "and you owe this institution the truth." Marjorie stammered, I don't know what she's talking about." But Naomi didn't flinch. "Then why is a competitor holding sensitive material from your office? Why was my daughter left standing here like a criminal while you conducted backdoor deals?" The question sliced through the silence. Have you ever witnessed a moment when truth refused to stay quiet, when someone stood up and everything shifted? The guard looked away. Zach, the teller, took a step back. And Marjorie? Her confidence cracked, and for the first time, she had no answer. The silence that followed Naomi Langston's words was not empty. It was charged, the kind of silence that waits for something to break. Marjorie Vaughn opened her mouth, then closed it again. She was cornered, and everyone knew it. Naomi stepped forward, calm but unshakable. "You've misused your position. You humiliated a child, and now I have reason to believe you've compromised private financial data." Her eyes locked on the assistant manager. "That's not just unethical. That's criminal." Marjorie flinched. I was just following protocol." "No," Naomi said, voice low and sure. "You were following prejudice and covering a betrayal with it." She turned toward the head of security. "Please escort Miss Vaughn out, effective immediately." The guard hesitated for a breath, then nodded. A moment later, the same woman who had ordered Amira watched, judged, and dismissed her, was being walked out past the customers she used to overlook. She didn't look back. That, more than anything, told the truth. Have you ever seen pride dissolve right before your eyes, when arrogance has no shield left to hide behind? Naomi adjusted the strap of her purse, then turned to the room. Her voice didn't rise, but it filled every corner. "This bank will undergo a full review. Training will be overhauled. And no one will ever be treated like my daughter was today." A murmur swept through the bank. Not fear, not gossip. Something closer to relief, like someone had opened a window after years of stale air. Amira stood a little taller. What had started as a quiet errand had become something much more. She wasn't just the girl with the check anymore. She was the reason something broken had finally been seen and fixed. In the weeks that followed, Jefferson Bank became a different place. Naomi Langston didn't just hold them accountable, she rebuilt the walls from the inside out. Policies were rewritten, faces changed, and for the first time, words like equity and dignity didn't just live on brochures. They lived in practice. But the biggest shift happened not in the boardroom, but in Amira. She had returned to school like any other student, backpack slung over one shoulder, quiet in the halls, focused in class. But something in her had deepened. She had faced something most adults never name aloud, and she hadn't folded. She had recorded the truth, spoken it aloud, and watched it move mountains. One afternoon, her teacher asked her to speak at the school assembly, not about the scandal, not even about the bank, but about resilience. Amira took the stage slowly, notebook in hand, palms damp. She scanned the crowd, students, teachers, even a few parents, all waiting, listening. "I used to think doing things alone made you stronger," she began. "That independence meant not asking for help. But I learned something. Real strength isn't about doing everything alone. Sometimes it's about standing up, even when your voice shakes." She paused. The auditorium hushed. "It's about knowing that how people treat you doesn't define who you are, but how you respond might define who you become." Have you ever turned a moment of deep hurt into something that helped others heal? By the time she stepped off the stage, the applause wasn't loud. It was steady. Honest. In her notebook, beside her original notes from that cold day in the bank, Amira scribbled 4 new words. "This will help someone." And maybe that was the point all along, not just to survive injustice, but to shape it into something others could stand on. Sometimes, life reminds us that strength doesn't always look like loud voices or big actions. Sometimes, it looks like a young girl standing quietly in a corner, refusing to let someone else define her worth. Amira's story is not just about a bank, or a check, or even the prejudice she faced. It's about what we do when the world doesn't see us clearly, and more importantly, what we see in ourselves. As we get older, we often think we've seen it all, but stories like this remind us that the fight for fairness is still being lived by our children and grandchildren. And perhaps the most powerful thing we can pass on is not fear or bitterness, but the steady example of grace, truth, and resilience. Have you ever stayed silent in the face of something wrong just to keep the peace? Maybe next time, like Amira, we find the strength to speak, not to punish, but to heal. Because the world doesn't change all at once. It changes one quiet act of courage at a time. And sometimes, that quiet strength echoes louder than we ever imagined. Amira never asked for applause. Her quiet strength didn't need it. What she carried out of that bank was not just her dignity, but a deeper kind of power, the kind that survives humiliation and still chooses to stand tall. That day didn't break her, it revealed her. In the weeks that followed, policies changed, voices were heard, and a place that once ignored a child began the slow work of becoming better. But the truth is, the real victory wasn't just in firings or reforms. It was in making sure her story didn't vanish, as so many others have. Because when we name injustice, when we witness it and refuse to look away, we create space for healing, for justice to breathe, for hope to last. If this story stayed with you, share it. Subscribe to Echoes of Racism so these voices don't fade into silence. In the meantime, I've chosen 2 stories I think will move you just as much. Take care, and we'll see you soon.